Welcome back, listeners. Ready for another deep dive? This one, it really sent chills down my spine when I first heard it.
Oh,
Yeah, it's one of those stories, it just sticks with you.
I hear you. Sometimes those personal accounts, they just hit differently.
Right, exactly. This one comes from a listener named Erin. She shared it on a paranormal podcast we were listening to.
Oh, wow. So this is a deep dive into a deep dive.
Uh-huh, yeah, kind of. Anyway, she was describing her experience living in this old Victorian house. You can practically picture it, right? Creaky floors, those high ceilings.
Classic haunted house vibes.
Totally. And to make it even better, it had one of those long, narrow hallways connecting all the bedrooms.
Ooh, I know that setup. So what happened in the hallway?
Well, that's where things get creepy. She kept seeing this shadow figure, always in the same spot.
Classic shadow figure, huh? You know, those are actually one of the most commonly reported paranormal phenomena, but they're still shrouded in mystery.
Yeah, that's true. For those who might be new to this whole shadow people thing, what are some of the most common, characteristics or theories about them?
Well, people usually describe them as like these dark, human-shaped forms. Sometimes they're really detailed and sometimes they're kind of hazy, almost like smoke.
Right, right. Yeah, I've heard that.
There are a bunch of different theories about what they could be. Some researchers think they might be some kind of negative entity, maybe even feeding off our fear.
Oh, wow, that's scary.
Yeah, or some people even suggest they could be glimpses into other dimensions, like we're seeing something that doesn't quite belong in our reality.
It's so creepy because you never really know what you're dealing with, right?
Exactly. It's that ambiguity that really gets under your skin, you know?
So back to Erin's story. She starts seeing this shadow figure, specifically in that long hallway we talked about. It starts with these, quick glimpses, like she'd be brushing her teeth and catch something out of the corner of her eye.
Those fleeting moments, always unsettling.
So she sees this tall, dark figure standing at the end of the hall, and she thinks it's maybe her dad or her brother, so she calls out to them.
Of course.
But there's no answer. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, the shadow vanishes.
It's like a scene straight out of a horror movie. That image of a dark figure lurking in a hallway just gets to you.
It really does.
Yeah.
So, I gotta know, did her family believe her when she told them what she saw?
Well, at first, her parents were kind of like most of us would be, trying to find a rational explanation. Maybe it was just her imagination, a trick of the light.
Sure, yeah.
But as things started happening more and more, even they had to start thinking, okay, maybe something strange is going on here.
That's usually the turning point, right? When it's just too much to ignore.
Exactly. And that's when things take a turn for the worse in Erin's story. The shadow figure starts showing up more often, always in that same spot at the end of the hall.
Oh, no. So it wasn't just a one-time thing.
Not at all. It became this recurring presence. Erin describes this feeling of being watched constantly, like this thing was observing her every move.
Oh, that's creepy.
And it wasn't just her. Her little brother Kyle started having his own encounters with the shadow.
Really? Oh, man. I gotta hear about this. What happened to Kyle?
Well, one night, Kyle wakes up screaming, saying he saw a man made of smoke standing in his doorway.
Oh, my God. No way.
Yeah, it was really terrifying. The description he gave was super similar to what Erin had seen, but this time, the shadow had actually come closer into his room.
That is so scary. I can't even imagine waking up to that. And the fact that both kids saw something so similar.
Right. That's going to make you think twice.
It definitely rules out just one kid's overactive imagination. This is like something else entirely.
It definitely lends credibility to their claims. When multiple people are reporting similar experiences, it suggests that there's something objective happening, something beyond just individual perception.
So what happened after Kyle's encounter? Did the family try to, figure out what was going on?
Well, can you blame them? Both kids were terrified to sleep with their doors open after that. But even with the doors closed, they started hearing these soft footsteps pacing up and down the hallway at night.
Oh, gosh, that would freak me out. Even in your own room, you're not safe.
Right. That feeling of being trapped with something unseen, it's a common thread in a lot of haunting cases.
It's like the house itself is closing in on you.
And in Erin's story, it only gets worse from there. It's not just the kids who start experiencing things. Her mom starts having some unsettling encounters of her own.
Really? Like what?
So lights would turn off by themselves, cold spots would pop up in the hallway, and she even described this weird tapping sound on the walls like someone was knocking from the inside.
Oh, that's so creepy. So it's like the activity is spreading, affecting everyone in the house.
It seems that way, yeah. Eventually, Erin's mom decides to stay up late one night. She wanted to prove to herself that it was all just in her head.
Oh, I can't wait to hear what happened. Did she get her proof?
Well, let's just say she got a whole lot more than she bargained for. Around midnight, she's sitting in the living room and she sees it, the shadow figure. But this time, it's different. It's not just a fleeting shadow, it's something more substantial, darker than the hallway itself, like it's absorbing the light around it.
That is so creepy, I have goosebumps. It's one thing to see a quick shadow, but to see something that seems to defy the laws of physics, that's just on another
It
level.
reminds me of a case I worked on in this old theater. People were describing a shadow figure that could actually move through walls, like it wasn't even bound by our physical reality.
Wait, seriously, didn't that case end up on one of those paranormal shows? The one where they used infrared cameras and got it on film going through a door?
That's the one. It really makes you question everything you thought you knew, right?
Absolutely. So, with all this happening, I'm wondering about Aaron's dad. It sounds like he was the skeptic in the family. Did he change his mind after his wife's encounter?
It's funny how even the biggest skeptics can have their doubts shaken when confronted with the unexplained. Even though he tried to blame everything on faulty wiring or drafts, he couldn't ignore it when the family dog started reacting to the empty hallway.
Oh, yeah. They say animals are super sensitive to paranormal activity, right? Like they can sense things we can't.
There's definitely a lot of stories and evidence suggesting that animals can pick up on things beyond our perception, especially dogs. They're known for their keen senses, right? So some people believe they can detect changes in energy or vibrations that might indicate a presence.
Wow, so what was the dog doing?
Aaron said he would growl at the seemingly empty hallway, like he could see something there that they couldn't.
That's so eerie. I've heard similar stories about dogs refusing to go into certain rooms or barking at nothing. Have you ever seen anything like that during your investigation?
Oh, all the time. Dogs, cats, you name it. They'll stare at empty space, hiss at nothing, just acting completely spooked for seemingly no reason. It's like they're picking up on something we're missing.
It gives me chills just thinking about it. Makes you wonder what they're seeing or hearing. Speaking of hearing, remember Erin and her brother mentioned those footsteps in the hallway. Could that be related to infrasound?
Ah, infrasound. Always a fascinating topic. Remember, it's sound waves that are too low for humans to hear, but even though we can't perceive them directly, they can still affect us in weird ways.
Yeah, I've read that infrasound can trigger feelings of unease, anxiety, even hallucinations. Some researchers think it might explain a lot of haunting experiences.
Right, especially the ones that involve feelings of dread or a sense of presence.
Hmm.
And get this, older homes like the one Aaron lived in might be more likely to generate infrasound because of their structure and materials. Think long hallways, narrow spaces.
So maybe the footsteps weren't footsteps at all, but just their brains trying to make sense of these weird vibrations caused by infrasound.
It's definitely a possibility, especially since they always heard it at night when everything was quieter, and those subtle sounds would be more noticeable. There was this famous case in a research lab back in the 90s. People were seeing apparitions and feeling uneasy, and it turned out a faulty fan was emitting infrasound at a specific frequency that could cause those exact effects.
Wow, that's wild. Sometimes science can actually explain these seemingly paranormal events.
It's true. But then there are those cases where science just doesn't have the answers yet. And those are the ones that keep things really interesting.
I agree. The mystery is what keeps us coming back for more. But in Aaron's story, it wasn't just the shadow figure and the footsteps. There was also that incident with the handyman and his tools. That sounds like classic poltergeist activity, right?
Yes, the poltergeist. Always a crowd pleaser. But the term poltergeist can be a bit misleading. People think it's always a ghost, but it's a lot more complex than that.
Wait, so poltergeists aren't actually ghosts?
Not necessarily. While they can be associated with hauntings, a lot of researchers now believe that poltergeist phenomena are often linked to a living person. Specifically, someone going through intense emotions, stress, or even trauma.
So you're saying their emotional energy could actually be manifesting as physical disturbances. That's fascinating.
Exactly. Almost like their subconscious mind is projecting these energies outward, causing things to move, make sounds, all those strange events.
It makes you think about the emotional state of Erin and her family. They were constantly living in fear, seeing this shadow, experiencing all these weird events. It wouldn't be surprising if that played a role in the poltergeist activity.
It's definitely worth considering. It highlights the connection between our psychological states and the paranormal. We tend to think of hauntings as being caused by outside forces, but what if sometimes they're a reflection of our own inner turmoil?
That's deep. So what happened next? Did the family reach out for help? Or just decide to move out?
Yeah, it would be tough to stick it out in a place like that. So did they end up moving? They did, yeah. After that whole handyman thing, it was like a breaking point for them. The haunting, or whatever it was, had just gotten too intense.
I can imagine. It's one thing to be fascinated by ghost stories, but actually living through it every day. That's got to be rough.
It definitely takes a toll. And for Erin, the last straw came when she was home alone one evening.
Oh no, what happened?
She was in her room trying to read, but she just couldn't shake this feeling of being watched.
I hate that feeling.
And then she heard it, heavy breathing coming from the hallway right outside her door.
Oh my gosh, no. What did she do?
Well, she slowly got up, heart pounding, and peeked through the crack in the door.
Oh, I don't know if I could do that.
And there it was, the shadow figure, closer than ever before, just a few feet away.
I would have died.
Hmm.
It's one thing to hear footsteps or catch a glimpse, but to come face to face with it like that, that's terrifying.
You're telling me. Erin totally freaked out, slammed the door shut, ran back to her bed, and hid under the covers until her parents got home.
I can't blame her. After something like that, how could you ever feel safe in that house again?
It's that feeling of violation, like
Yeah.
your personal space has been invaded by something you can't even see.
It's the stuff of nightmares.
Yeah.
So they moved out, right?
Yep, soon after that, they packed up and left. Just couldn't take it anymore.
I can't say I blame them.
Hmm.
It's sad, though, a place that should be a home becoming a source of fear like that.
It really is. It reminds us that these experiences, whether they're paranormal or not, they can have a huge impact on our lives.
Mm.
Our sense of safety, our well-being, everything.
So what happened to the house? Did they ever sell it?
That's where it gets interesting. They never sold it, but they also refused to ever live there again.
Wow, so it just sits there empty,
Pretty much, yeah, like a monument to their terrifying experience.
like a physical reminder of the trauma they went through. But you know what's really interesting? Erin didn't just try to forget about it. She actually went back to the house as an adult to try and figure out what had happened.
I love that. It takes a lot of courage to face your feels like that.
For sure. So what did she find when she went back?
Well, she did some digging into the history of the house, trying to learn about the people who lived there before.
Sounds like quite the investigation.
And she uncovered something pretty creepy, a connection to the shadow figure she had seen all those years ago.
Oh, this is getting good. What did she find?
Get this. Decades earlier, a man had died in the house. He had a heart attack right there in the hallway, in the exact spot where the shadow figure always appeared.
Wow, that's too much of a coincidence to ignore. Do you think there could be a link between the man's death and the shadow figure?
It's definitely a possibility. It makes you think about those theories about residual hauntings, right?
Right, where a location holds on to the energy of past events, especially traumatic ones, like an echo of what happened there.
Exactly. So in this case, it's possible that the energy of the man's death, the fear and pain he felt in his final moments, it somehow got imprinted on that spot in the hallway.
So the shadow figure could have been like a residual echo of that man's death, a fragment of his energy that remained in the house.
It's pretty compelling theory, especially considering that the shadow figure was always in the same spot and never really interacted with anyone, like it was a recording on repeat.
That sends chills down my spine. The idea that pieces of our experiences, our emotions, could linger in places like that is both fascinating and terrifying.
It definitely makes you wonder about the nature of consciousness and energy, doesn't it? It's why we're so drawn to these stories of hauntings. They make us question everything we think we know.
Well said. Erin's story has given us a lot to ponder. It's a reminder that the world is full of mysteries, things we may never fully understand.
And it shows the power of personal experience. Even when others are skeptical, these stories matter. They deserve to be heard and explored.
Absolutely. And speaking of stories, we want to hear from you, our listeners. Have you ever experienced a haunting, encountered a shadow figure, or felt that unexplained sense of unease in a specific place? Share your stories with us. We'd love to hear them. And until next time, keep exploring the unknown, and remember, sometimes the most frightening things are the ones we can't see.